This happened on New Year's Eve in 2014, back when I was a senior in college in Massachusetts. My name is Adam. That night, I decided to go to a massive outdoor concert in downtown Boston with my two friends, Brian and Stephen. Thousands of people were there, and the air was filled with a mix of falling snow and loud music. My parents had always warned me about crowded places, but that night I had brushed their concerns aside. It was around 10:30 p.m. when someone in the crowd shoved Brian hard, and he got separated from us. We were frantically trying to find him when suddenly a middle-aged man wearing a neon yellow safety vest, the kind the event staff usually wears, approached me. He said with total confidence that my friend had fainted and had been taken to the security area. He sounded so convincing that Stephen and I followed him without a second thought. He led us through a dirt path behind the stage toward an old brick building that looked like a warehouse. The roar of the crowd was fading into a dull hum. As we reached a small iron door, I realized there was no security or medical team in sight. I stopped and asked where Brian was. He silently pushed the door open and signaled for us to go inside. The interior was lit by a single dim yellow bulb, and a pungent chemical odor hung in the air. As Stephen was about to step inside, I grabbed his arm and pulled him back. At that exact moment, two more men emerged from behind the door wearing surgical masks. They were holding what looked like ropes and syringes. The man who had led us there no longer looked helpful. His expression was cold and vacant as he stared at us. We realized then that this wasn't a medical emergency. They had lured us away from the noise to a place where no one could hear our screams. One of them lunged at Stephen, grabbing him by the neck to pull him inside. Stephen fought back, and we both bolted, running back the way we came. The path was narrow and slick with ice. By 11:15 p.m., as we sprinted through that desolate alley, the only thing I could hear was the sound of my own ragged breathing. The three men weren't just chasing us. They were calmly fanning out in different directions, acting like they knew every inch of the area and were surrounding us. We ran into a dead-end alley blocked by a high wall. I turned around to see the man in the yellow vest holding a heavy metal pipe. He said in a bone-chillingly calm voice, "You have two choices. Come with us quietly, or your families will only ever find your bodies." There was no anger in his tone, just a terrifying indifference that was far scarier than rage. At exactly 11:45 p.m., as test fireworks exploded in the sky above, the flashes of light revealed a broken iron railing at the top of the wall. I gave Stephen a boost, and he scrambled up, then reached down to pull me up. As I climbed, the man lunged and grabbed my foot, but my boot slipped off in his hand, and I tumbled over the other side. I landed barefoot in a frozen, snow-covered drainage ditch. We ran along that ditch in the dark for nearly 15 minutes until we saw the blue flashing lights of police cars in the distance. We reached the main street, gasping for air, where the crowds of revelers were beginning to gather again. When we told the police and they searched the warehouse, it was completely empty. However, they found Stephen's wallet on the floor, which had fallen out while we were running. Carved into the leather with a surgical blade was a perfect X. The most haunting part came later. The police investigation revealed that the building had been abandoned for years, and the actual event staff didn't even wear yellow vests. These people were systematically targeting young men who looked isolated or vulnerable. At 12 a.m., while the whole world was shouting Happy New Year, I was sitting on a police station bench, shivering, unable to forget that man's blank, staring eyes. We found Brian an hour later. He had simply gotten lost in the crowd, and his phone had died.
He had never been taken to any security area. The entire story was a lie to lure us into that warehouse. It wasn't just a close call. It was an organized group of predators using the chaos of the night to make people disappear. To this day, whenever I see someone in a yellow safety vest at a public event, my heart sinks. That night in 2014 was the last time I ever trusted a stranger. The horror I felt in their silence was more lethal than any weapon.
If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Also, let me know in the comments how you found the video. Now, let's move on to the next story.
My name is Deborah, and what happened to me last New Year's Eve in Washington Square Park changed my perspective on crowds forever. I had gone to New York City to celebrate the New Year with my younger sister, Lacey, and our parents. It was 11:15 p.m., and the entire park was packed with thousands of people. There was noise, music, and lights everywhere, but inside that crowd, something was very wrong. We were standing near the stage where live music was playing. Lacey kept pulling my hand, wanting a better view. That's when I noticed 3 men who looked like ordinary tourists circling us in a constant loop. They weren't talking to each other. Their eyes were just fixed on us. When I signaled to my dad, Robert, he dismissed it, saying I was overthinking it because everyone was standing so close together. At 11:35 p.m., the crowd density suddenly surged. People started pushing to get a better spot for the countdown. In the chaos, one of those 3 men stepped right behind me. I felt him take something metallic out of his jacket and expertly press it against the back of my coat. I thought it was a pickpocket, but when I looked back, his eyes were blank and cold. He silently put a finger to his lips, signaling me to stay quiet. I gripped Lacey's hand tight and tried to call out to my mom, Catherine, but the music was so loud it drowned me out. The man was so close now I could hear him breathing. He whispered into my ear, "If you make a sound, it will take me 1 second to let go of your sister's hand, and in this crowd, she'll never be found." The threat was so real, my blood turned to ice. By 11:45 p.m., I realized he wasn't alone. His 2 partners had positioned themselves around my parents and Lacey, forming a human wall between us and the rest of the crowd. They looked professional, likely a human trafficking or kidnapping ring that preys on massive gatherings. They began nudging us away from the stage toward a dark corner of the park where security and police presence was thin. My dad finally realized something was wrong, but as soon as he tried to resist, one of them jabbed something sharp into his ribs, likely a small knife or a taser. My dad's face went pale with pain, but he stayed silent for Lacey's sake. They forced us toward an alleyway leading out of the park. A black van was idling there, its engine running. It was 11:55 p.m. The whole city was chanting, 5, 4, 3. Right as the first firework exploded in the sky, I saw a police officer standing nearby glance our way. But the kidnappers were clever. They immediately hugged us as if we were all old friends celebrating the New Year. To anyone watching, we looked like a happy group, but inside, we were paralyzed by the fear of death. As the clock struck midnight and the world erupted in cheers, they began dragging Lacey toward the van. I realized that if I didn't act now, I would lose my sister forever. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a bottle of perfume, and sprayed it directly into the eyes of the man behind me. He recoiled in pain, his grip loosening. I started screaming,
but not just any scream. I yelled, "Fire! Fire!" In a city like New York, people might ignore a fight, but the word fire causes an instant stampede. My screams startled the people around us, and chaos broke out. The pressure of the crowd surging away from the fire forced the men away from us. My dad took the chance to shove one of the kidnappers hard, and we bolted toward the police car. By the time we got the police back to that spot, the black van was gone. The police told us that these groups are experts at using critical mass, huge crowds, to make people disappear. The most terrifying part came later. When my mom checked her handbag, she found a small AirTag tracker that they had slipped in at some point so they could follow us even outside the park. We spent that night in the police station. Lacey was in shock, and my dad's side was bandaged. Even today, whenever I'm in a large crowd, I feel like I'm being followed. Those people weren't ghosts. They were flesh and blood predators who used a human sea as their weapon. That New Year's celebration was the last time I ever celebrated in a public space.
My name is Mark, and what happened last New Year's Eve was easily the most terrifying night of my life. I live alone in a small apartment in a busy part of Chicago. That night, 3 of my closest friends, Jackson, Matt, and Clark, were over. We had planned to skip the crowded streets, order some pizza, have a few beers, and ring in the new year at home. It was snowing outside, and the streets visible from my window were packed with cars and revelers. At about 9:30 p.m., while we were in the living room playing PlayStation, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, a photo of us 4, taken from outside my apartment window. At first, I thought a friend was pulling a prank from the street. I showed it to Jackson, who laughed and said it was probably our friend Chris stuck in the parking lot. But when I called the number back, it disconnected immediately and stayed dead. We tried to shrug it off and got back to the game. At 10:45 p.m., there was a loud rhythmic pounding on my apartment door. Jackson went to the peephole, but the hallway was empty. He even opened the door to check the corridor, but it was dead silent. As he turned back, he saw a small slip of white paper that had been slid under the door. It read, "You're running out of pizza. Want me to bring more?" Cold sweat broke out on our foreheads. We had literally finished the last slice just minutes before. Matt, getting angry, said the joke had gone too far. He looked out the window and saw a figure in a black hoodie standing perfectly still across the street, staring up at our unit. The man raised his arm and pointed to his watch, as if signaling that our time was running out. By 11:15 p.m., the laughter was gone. We killed all the lights so no one could see inside. We huddled in the kitchen corner, terrified that he might actually get into the building. Suddenly, my laptop, which was open on the table, started playing music. It was a haunting old melody I had never downloaded. Clark rushed to shut it, but at that exact moment, the power went out. The rest of the block still had lights. Someone had manually flipped the breaker from my unit from the outside. We were in total darkness, save for the faint glow of the streetlights. At 11:40 p.m., we heard something hit the bedroom window. It sounded like someone had climbed up the fire escape. Jackson grabbed a knife from the kitchen, and we crept toward the bedroom. There, standing on the fire escape, was the man in the hoodie. He held a large rock with my address written on it. He tapped on the glass, gave a bone-chilling smile, and pulled a key from his pocket. It was a duplicate key to my apartment. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I had no idea how he got a key to my home. We scrambled out of the bedroom, locked the door, and dragged my heavy sofa in front of the main entrance to barricade it. It was 11:55 p.m.
Outside, the sounds of fireworks and celebration began to erupt, but to us, it sounded like a funeral march. Then we heard it clearly, a key turning in the lock of the front door. He was trying to get in, but the sofa held the door shut. From the other side of the door, a calm, low voice whispered, "Jackson, Matt, Clark, it's good to see you all at Mark's place." The fact that he knew all our names sent a shock through us. He slid a small hand through the narrow gap of the door, holding a diary. He tossed it inside and said, "Happy New Year. Read this gift." Then we heard his footsteps fading as he walked calmly down the stairs. At exactly 12 a.m., while the rest of the world was celebrating, we opened that diary with trembling hands. It contained a meticulous log of our lives for the past 6 months. Every detail was there. When I went grocery shopping, when Matt visited his girlfriend, what time Clark went to the gym. On the last page, it said, "I only came today to show you that I can get to you whenever I want. Next time, I won't knock." We called 911 and the police arrived within 10 minutes. They searched the building and checked the CCTV, but the man was gone. His face never appeared clearly on the cameras because he always kept his head down. In the hallway outside my door, police found a bag containing the pizza he had mentioned, but it was completely raw and drenched in blood. None of us stayed in our apartments after that night. I moved to a different state the following week. Even now, if I get a message from an unknown number or hear a knock at night, I freeze up. Who he was and what he wanted remains a mystery, but he made us realize you are never truly safe, even in your own home. That New Year's Eve turned a holiday of joy into a lifetime of fear. Now, whenever I hear a countdown, I see that hooded figure standing across the street, keeping a tally of our lives. It wasn't a ghost story, it was the obsession of a living man that changed us forever.